when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in 1914. The complex web of alliances drew one great power into the war after another until Europe was marching to war. It's now late 1916. Meet Albert Birdie Fletcher of Liverpool, a 2-year veteran of the trenches. He's a 21-year-old former shop clerk who jumped at the chance to fight. He is a battle-hardened, physically and mentally scarred warrior who has survived some of the most hellish conditions that have ever been experienced. It wasn't always this way. When the war broke out, he was a 19-year-old shopkeeper, but Britain declared war. Lord Kiter set out the call for volunteers. Birdie was eager to serve the war effort and briefly thought about joining the Royal Navy, but the idea of being stuck in a tin can bobbing along in the ocean didn't appeal to him. So he joined the flood of young men who enlisted in the Army. Normally, a stint in the regular Army was for 12 years. Though in light of the recent hostilities, a shorter term was enacted. After waiting in line for several hours, Fletcher signed up for 3 years or the duration of the war, whichever was longer. Once he signed up, Fletcher was then subjected to a series of tests to ensure he was fit to be a soldier. Regulations stated that a recruit be between 18 to 38 years old and at least 5'3" tall. Birdie's 19 years old and 5'9" tall, so he ticks all the boxes here. He's then sent off to a more thorough examination where doctors check his vision and hearing. His heart and lungs are in working order, no obvious signs of disease, good teeth, no speech impediments, and a number of other criteria, all of which he passes without issue. In the confusion of the early war, recruitment offices and medical staff were overwhelmed, and many who didn't meet the standards were approved for military service anyway. Once the medical check is completed, he then swears on a Bible his oath of loyalty to king and country, to obey all generals and officers over him, and to serve until the end of hostilities. The influx of recruits led to the creation of new battalions which would then be attached to existing regiments. Fletcher is sent to the King's Liverpool Regiment, which could trace its history back to the 17th century. He's put through training where he learned everything he needed to know as a soldier. Discipline was strict, but he and his comrades soon learned how to function as a unit, to obey orders, and how to fight in what will shape up to be a war on an industrial scale. This training turned civilians into soldiers, men like Birdie, soon to be sent to the front. But while he prepared to face the horrors of the trenches, far from the mud and gunfire, others were shaping the very course of the war itself, deciding when to attack, where to send men, and which nations would rise or fall. Now you can step into their shoes in today's sponsor, Supremacy 1914. Supremacy 1914 is a free online PvP grand strategy game where you command an actual nation during World War I. Matches unfold in real time over weeks as you mobilize cavalry, artillery, and early tanks. Manage your economy and negotiate or backstab alliances with up to 499 other players. It's fully cross-platform PC, iOS, and Android, so your empire is always within reach. And right now, new players who use our link in the description or pin comment will get an exclusive starter pack worth $15, and then immediate access to the brand new Hero system. Take the seat Birdie never could. Rewrite the course of the Great War. Click the link and start playing Supremacy 1914 today. One of the most important skills he learns is how to use his weapon. This is the short magazine Lee Enfield Mark III, or SMLE. This workhorse of the British Army was adopted for service in 1907. Weighed in at 8 3/4 pounds, or about 4 kilograms, and was 44.5 in or 111.6 centimeters long, with a 25 in or 63.5 centimeters barrel. It was bolt action, capable of holding 10.303 caliber rounds in the detachable magazine, twice the quantity of the German Mauser. With each British soldier, or Tommy, capable of shooting over 20 aimed shots per minute, they could provide more firepower than the Germans, a process called the Mad Minute. In one incident, a unit of British riflemen fired so rapidly that the Germans were convinced they were facing concentrated machine gun fire. Fletcher wasn't there, but he smiles to himself as this thought crosses his mind. It's one of the few moments of levity he's had these days. It's now late 1916, and he's huddled in his frontline trench. He still clings to his rifle and adjusts his webbing. He, like all British infantrymen, wears a 1908 pattern webbing over his uniform. Attached to this is his 17 inches bayonet, canteen, nest tin, ammunition pouches, and entrenching tool, which could also double as a weapon in close-quarter combat. He also has a hersick, which contains personal items, spare clothes, and his greatcoat when he wasn't wearing it. Around his legs were puttees, lengths of cloth that were designed to keep the wet and muddy terrain out. If this doesn't work, he runs the risk of trench foot from the constant moisture in his boots. Dry socks are as much a necessity as a functioning rifle. On his head is a steel Brodie helmet, the first issued in 1915, and he also has a gas mask in case the Germans deploy mustard or chlorine gas. After the initial scramble, the soldiers created an extensive network of trenches that extended from Belgium to Switzerland. The Germans had a more defensive strategy and dug in for the long run. The Entente, however, believed that one more offensive, one more mass charge across no man's land, and the war would be over. As a result, British trenches were miserable, muddy with poor drainage, and wooden duckboards were placed to keep the soldiers from sinking into the muck. Rats were also a constant problem, and there was the ever-present stench of decaying bodies that were left unburied. The trenches were arranged in multiple layers. At the front was the firing trench. Behind that was a support trench, and behind that a reserve trench. These would be connected by a series of communication trenches that allowed the soldiers to move back and forth without exposing themselves. Soldiers didn't stay in one trench for too long. Instead, they would spend time in the firing trench. They would rotate back through the more rearward sections, then being held in reserve, usually for 4 days to a week in each position. Though this was ideal, and on the Western Front, things were never ideal. Today, Albert Fletcher is in the firing trench, the one closest to the enemy. There's no activity, but he and the other soldiers are fully equipped with fixed bayonets in case of enemy action. Other than standing by for an enemy attack, life in the trenches follows a specific routine. Each morning, everyone in the line would stand to or step up to the firing line in preparation to repel an enemy attack. Once this was done, sentries would be placed. While the other soldiers were turned to other tasks, Fletcher avoids sentry duty, but after a breakfast of some sort of tinned meat, he's told it's beef, but he has his doubts. His NCO inspects his weapon and kit to ensure it's all in functioning condition, which it is. He then helps replace some of the duckboards and reinforce the trench, which is in need of repairs after recent rain. After this, he faces a soldier's constant companion, boredom. When not under attack or busy with work, a soldier really doesn't have much to do. Taking advantage, Fletcher takes the opportunity to write a letter to his parents back in Liverpool. He's written hundreds of them, one of over the 12 million sent back home per week. After lunch, Fletcher relieves his comrades in one of the small dugouts a little ahead of the main trench line. He spends his time there constantly, alert for an enemy assault, infiltration, or worst of all, a gas attack. On this day, he and the rest of his men are lucky. Neither he nor the Germans a few hundred yards away are in the mood for a fight. And the day passes quietly, the only movement turning out to be a very large rat. This isn't always the case. A few months before Fletcher and the other elements of the King S Regiment were involved at the Battle of the Some Weeks of mass assaults against German positions, blistering machine gun fire, and incessant artillery barrages led to the death of tens of thousands of British soldiers in the first day alone, the greatest loss of life in the nation's military history. Fletcher was lucky, receiving a superficial wound to his shoulder and arm from shrapnel. He was sent to an aid station, but after being bandaged, he was sent back to the front. With the sounds of the enemy machine gun fire still echoing in his mind, he snaps back to the present. The day is almost done, and he and the rest of his men stand to again at dusk, a defense against infiltration, and as the night closes around them, the men don't always get the luxury of sleep. Instead, sentries are again posted, and some, like Fletcher, are sent into no man's land to re-ring barbed wire that's stretched in front of the line. This was always dangerous, leaving the relative safety of the trenches, but it had to be done. With yet another year right around the corner, things look uncertain. France has been bled white. The Russians are teetering on the edge, and there are rumors of the Americans getting involved. But no one seriously thinks such an isolationist nation will actually fight. Fletcher settles in for some restless sleep, remembering his oath, 3 years or the duration, whichever was longer. The way things were going, it will be much, much longer. If you want to experience the grand scale of strategy and command for yourself, check out Supremacy 1914. Use the link in the description or pinned comment to claim your free $15 starter pack and begin rewriting the course of the Great War today.